Ridley Walker, Chapter 8. Good Parley and Orphing had a red and black striped fit-up. It been standing there ready to go, and little kids creeping in and out of it whilst we've been doing the scar take. Orphing cleared the kids out. He told them their heads would turn to wood if they didn't come out of it quick. He always said the same thing, trying to be jokey. The kids know it. He probably would have knocked their heads together if they hadn't been no other grown-ups looking on. That's why they like it giving him bother. Good Parley gave me the nod, and I stood up for the show talk. Same as my dad in his time, and his dad before him. I said, "We are going, ain't we?" The crowd said, "Yes, we are going." I said, "Down that road with you, sir." They said, "Time and required." I said, "Where them changes take us?" They said, "He done this time, we'll do our time." I said, "He's doing it for us." They said, "We are doing it for him." I said, "Keep it going. Chances this time." They said, "Chances next time." I said, "New chance every time." They said, "New chance every time." I sat down then. Good Parley inside the fit-up. Orphing standing by for the patter, looking at the fit-up. Nothing to see, only the red-black cloth with black smoke and orange flames painted on it, and the empty space where Yusa would come up. Orphing gone close to the fit-up and talking to the lower part where Yusa were inside, readying the show, nor you couldn't see him yet. He said, "Trouble not." Yusa's voice from down inside said, "No trouble." Orphing said, "Well, if there ain't no trouble, why don't you come up where we can see you?" Yusa's voice, which is where always a low and sorrowful kind of voice, even them times when you might think Yusa might be jollier nor other times, said, "It don't make no difference if I come up or not, you can't see me anyhow." Orphing said, "Why can't we see you?" Yusa's voice said, "Because the main part of me ain't where you can see it." Orphing said, "Yusa, nobody wants to see the main part of you. We just want you to come up and do a show." Yusa's voice said, "That's a larf, isn't it? How can I do a show if I can't show the main part of me?" Orphing said, "Yusa, what is that main part you keep talking on?" Yusa's voice said, "It's that same part where I do my best work within it." Orphing said, "Well, Yusa, it's the same with all us blokes. We all do our best work with that same part, don't we?" Yusa's voice said, "You don't, or you wouldn't be talking so stupid. It's my head I'm talking about, that's my main part." Orphing said, "Yusa, be you saying it's your head we can't see?" Yusa's voice said, "That's what I've been saying." Orphing said, "Why not? Why can't we see your head?" Yusa's voice said, "Because it's burned into the ground, that's why." Orphing said, "Yusa, this ain't no time to stick your head in the ground. We've got work to do. We've got a show to do." Yusa's voice said, "Orphing, you ain't very quick, are you? I could get better patter peeing against a wall. I ain't stuck my actual head in the ground, nor I ain't talking on a head I'm talking with." Orphing said, "What head be you talking on then, Yusa?" Yusa's voice said, "When I say my head, it's just a way of saying. Only it's over your head, isn't it? Maybe your head's the one what's buried in the ground." Orphing said, "Yusa, won't you make life easier all round if you just come up and done your show?" Yusa's voice said, "That's your trouble, Orphan. You keep looking for an easy life. You won't move nothing front ways that way." Yusa come up then, slow and scanful like, always turning his wooden head this way and that, and his painted eyes taking us all in. Many and many is the time I'd look back at them staring blue eyes, since back before I could remember it even. Only this time, it seemed like it were the first time I were seeing him, and I were afraid of him. The way he kept turning his head, it made me think of that thing with no name looking out through our eye holes. Orphing said, "Well, Yusa, if you're ready to show, then I can sit down now." Yusa said, "Yes, I'm ready to show, and I will tell you, this ain't no made-up show this time. It's all true facts from the mincery, and been wrote down the same." Orphing said, "True facts, is it? This here's going to be the Parper Establishment men's story, it is. Is it?" Yusa said, "That's what it's going to be, right enough." Orphing said, "Maybe I best stand up then." Yusa said, "You best sit down, Orphing. Don't give me no interference." Orphing sat down then. Yusa looked it round on all us again. He said, "This here what you're going to see, it happened time way back when I work it for Mr. Clever." Orphing said, "Oh, that been ever so far back. Long time, thousands and thousands, ever so many. You wouldn't do nothing like that now. You wouldn't bring on no bad time again, would you?" Yusa said. You can rest your mouth now, Ernie. We don't need no more patter. I'm showing now. Orphan said. Yes, you are. You're showing right enough. Well, carry on, Yusa. I won't say no more. Yusa said. Right you are, and let that be the last of it. Orphan don't say nothing more. Yusa says to us, this is time back, way back like I said. He goes down and he comes up with a paper and pen and ink and measuring stick and a triangle. He's writing, he's numbering, he's drawing lines all over that paper. He's thinking hard, he's murmuring to himself, then he's scratching his head and he's thinking some more. He groans a little, then he says, all these here numbers and that, it's all too much to keep in one head and programming myself. What I need is another head, and bigger, so I can do some of this heavy head work for me. Yusa does down again, and he's clanging and banging, he's huffing and puffing and hammering, and it sounds like he's bellering up a redding fire, and he's beating something on a handle. Soon, Yusa comes up again. This time he's got like an iron hat on his head, 2 long wires coming out on top of the hat, and little pegs on the ends of the wires. Plus there's a cranking handle on the side of the iron hat. Yusa's trying to shift some kind of a box. It's bigger than he is. He gets the box, heave it up on his showboard. He says, whew, that's a heavy one. There's a cranking handle on the side of the box as the one on Yusa's hat. 2 little holes in a slot in the top of the box and another slot in one end of it. Yusa says, 2 heads are better than one. He takes them 2 wires coming out of his hat and he pegs them into the holes in the box. He says, now I will just input a few things into my number 2 head. He's turning that crank on his iron hat. Yusa says, now let's see if it works. He takes a piece of paper and he says out loud what he's writing on it. What's my name? He puts the piece of paper in the slot in the top of the box. He says, now let's see if you can answer that. Yusa turns the crank on the side of the box and a piece of paper comes out of the slot in the end of the box. There's writing on the paper. Yusa reads it out. My name is Yusa. Yusa says, that's the ticket. He's turning the crank on his iron hat some more then. He's inputting all kinds of knowing out of his head into the box. Mr. Clever comes up and he's watching Yusa and listening to him. Yusa's mumbling all kinds of numbers and formulas in sounds like he's inputting all the knowing there ever been in the whole world out of his head into that box. He's saying the numbers of the rainbow and the fire quanter. He's saying the smallery numbers and the biggery numbers, and it sounds like he's saying something about the one big one. Mr. Clever, he's leaning closer and closer. He's listening. Mr. Clever, he says to Yusa, that's a governor lot of knowing you're inputting into that box. Probably there's knowing enough in there for any kind of thing. Yusa says, that's about it. I don't think there's many things you couldn't do with that knowing. You could do anything at all. You could make boats in the air and you could blow a world apart. Mr. Clever says, scatter my datter, that certainly is interesting. Yusa, tell me something though. Why do you input all that knowing out of your head into that box? Why don't you keep it in your head? Wouldn't it be safe there? Yusa says, well, you see, I can't just keep this knowing in my head. I've got things to do with it. I've got to work it around. I've got to work with equations and the lowercations. I've got to comb the nations of it, which I can't do all that onsome in my head. That's why I need this box. It's going to do the heavy head work for my new project. Mr. Clever says, what is that new project of yours then, Yusa? Yusa says, good time. Mr. Clever says, Yusa, did I hear you say good time with a governor G and a governor T? Yusa says, that's what I said and that's how I said it. Good time, which I mean everything good and everybody happy and technological progress moving everything frontways farther and farther all the time. You name it, we'll do it. Past the sovereign galaxies and all that. Mr. Clever says, you've got all that in that box, have you? Yusa says, you might say I've got the nuts and balls of it all in that box, which is my number 2 head, but I've got the master program in my regular head, which is the one on my shoulders. Mr. Clever said, well, Yusa, you've got a Parper winner you are. I'm really looking for it to have that good time secret. Yes, I am. Yusa says, oh no, Mr. Clever, this ain't no secret, nor it ain't for you. It's good time for everybody. Mr. Clever says, you must be joking, Yusa. Who do you think you're working for? With that, he takes hold of the cranking handle on Yusa's iron hat, which the hat is still on Yusa's head, and the wires peg it into the box. Mr. Clever is cranking that handle 10 times faster than Yusa ever done. When Mr. Clever finally leaves off cranking, You can see Yusa's her well worn out. Mr. Clever, he says, "Well, Yusa, old son, let's see how much you know now. Can you tell me the numbers of the rainbow and the fire quanter?" Yusa, he says, "I never heard of nothing like that, governor." Mr. Clever, he says, "Well, never mind them. How about 2 plus 2? What would that come to?" Yusa says, "I wouldn't know that, Gov. I really couldn't say." Mr. Clever says, "Very good, Yusa, my boy. Now just one more thing. What's your name?" Yusa says, "I don't know." Mr. Clever says, "That's it. Then I've emptied you out right enough. Now I've got the head with the knowing, and you've got the head with the nothing." He unconnects Yusa's wires, then he picks up the box, says, "Bye-bye, Yusa, all best," and off he goes. Yusa's standing there in his iron hat with his wires hanging down. He don't have nothing to say. Down comes the little shiny man. He's hanging there in the air. He's in 2 pieces. He says, "Well, Yusa, it looks like you've lost your head, don't it?" Yusa says, "I don't know what I've lost. I ain't very quick." The little shiny man says, "Well, Yusa, you best quicken up fast then, because they're gone good time and here comes trouble." Yusa says, "It looks like you've seen trouble already. You ain't even in 1 piece." The little man says, "Yusa, don't you know who done this to me? Don't you know who tore me in 2? Don't you know who opened me like a chicken time way back in the wood in the heart of the stone?" Yusa says, "How could I know that?" The little man says, "Because you're the one who's done it." Yusa says, "I didn't know that. I've lost it clean out of rememberment." The little man says, "Yusa, listen to me now. That don't matter. You and me, we are 2 halves of the one thing. It don't matter if you tear me apart or I tear you apart. But the one as tears the other apart has got to put something together, and you ain't done that. That's why I'm in 2 pieces now, and 2 pieces is what I will be until you get your head back. Do you know why?" Yusa says, "No, I don't." The little man says, "Because you won't put nothing together till then, that's why. You won't put no good time together now, because Mr. Clever's going to do a bad time with that head of yours, nor there won't be no good time till you get it back. Bye-bye, Yusa. Quicken up as fast as you can. The world don't wait for no one." The little shiny man goes up and Yusa goes down, and it looks like that's the end of the show. Orphan jumps up then. He goes over to the fit-up and talking to the lower part of it like he done before the show. He says, "Oi, Yusa, hang on a minute." Yusa's voice says, "Yusa's been and showed. Yusa's on the road." Orphan says, "Yusa, you're getting in front of yourself. You ain't ready to road, yet you ain't done with this here show." Yusa shoots up then. He says, "Ernie, you're the one what's getting in front of yourself and going to fall over yourself and all if you don't get careful. You're getting in your own way. It's what you're doing, Ernie." Yusa's face can't change. It's always the same. But when you're watching him move around and listening to what he's saying, and the torch fire shining, and all who will look near anyways he's talking. This time he looks like he's getting his circuits just that little bit overloaded. The show board is near a head higher nor Orphan, so Yusa is well up of him. Orphan backs off a little so he can look Yusa in the eye. He says, "Getting in your way is what you mean, innit, Yusa?" Yusa says, "I don't think you would want to do that, Ernie. You know you would end up with a face full of footprints and a heart full of sorrow." Orphan says, "Yusa, I've had the both of them this long time now, waitful for a bettering." Yusa says, "Ernie, you ain't going to stand there and worry me. You ain't going to bore me to death. You ain't going to come the heavy statement, are you? You didn't call me back for that, did you? What did you call me back for?" Orphan says, "You know why I called you back, Yusa." Yusa says, "If I did, I wouldn't be asking, would I?" Orphan says, "Yusa, you know what the Yusa story says. Everybody knows it, even them as can't read. It were you as opened up the little shiny man and let the numbers of the master changes out." Yusa says, "Yes, I done that right enough. I never said I didn't." Orphan says, "Plus, you put that one big one in Barnes, didn't you? It says in Yusa 18. Yusa put the one big one in Barnes, then him and Mr. Clever dropped it so much Barnes they killed as many of their own as they killed enemies. Yet now in this here show, you're telling us it didn't like that. You're telling us you didn't do none of them bad time things. You're putting it all on Mr. Clever. You're saying he took your knowing and he done it all." All this long time, we've been believing it like you told it in the Yusa story, and now you come on telling it wholly different. What in the world makes you think we're going to believe a new story now? Yusa says, "This ain't nothing new. Didn't I tell you this is true facts and wrote down the same at the mincery?" Orphan says, "If it's true facts, then why you been telling it different all these years? Why'd you pick now to change your story?" Yusa says, "Ernie, you're a Parker Hallfist, aren't you? You get your teeth clamped down on something or you won't let go. You just hold fast." Orphan says, "I'm just only saying what anyone might say, ain't I? The shows are different all the time, that's how it's meant to be. Which a show is something you're doing right now, in this here time we're living in, and you're doing the changes with Yusa. New things happening and new chances every time. That's how it's meant to be, and that's how we always do it. But that story been wrote time back, way back, nor you can't change it. No one never ever changed the story before this. That story's got to stay the same, whatever it is, and nothing change it." Yusa says, "Ernie, what's the difference anyhow?" Orphan says, "What do you mean by that?" Yusa says, "What's the difference if I done the actual bad time things myself or if I didn't?" Orphan says, "Well, if you didn't do it, then it ain't on you, is it?" Yusa says, "And if it ain't on me, then what?" Orphan says, "Then you are free, ain't you? Nothing on you and the world in front of you. Do whatever you like." Yusa says, "There you are, and set it out on your own mouth. Which would you rather, have the world in front of you and free, or have something heavy on your back forever?" Orphan says, "Yusa, it don't matter what you would rather. You got to go by how things are. You got to go by what's truth and what ain't." Yusa says, "Cut my throat and guard my witness if I ain't telling the truth. I never made no bargains nor never drop it none." Orphan says, "Here we come round again. It's a full circle. If you didn't make no barms, no drop no barms, then why do you say you did when you wrote down that story? Don't cut your throat now, or someone I know will have a bloody finger." Yusa says, "Why did I say I did?" Orphan says, "That's what I said. Why do you say you did?" Yusa says, "Ernie, you know how it is when you blame yourself." Orphan says, "No, I don't. How is it?" Yusa says, "Well, you will oversay, won't you? You will say worse than you really done. Whatever it might be. Say you've left a knife where a babby gets hold of it, and it cuts itself. Here's the babby all bloody, and you will say, 'Oh dear, oh dear, oh dear, I done that, didn't I? It's on me, all this blood.'" Orphan says, "Well, it is, isn't it? I mean, if you hadn't opened up the little shiny man, the atom, and let out the numbers of the master changes of the one big one, then if you hadn't put that knowing in that box." Yusa says, "If I hadn't, someone else would have done. Why'd the heart of the woods stand? Why didn't it run? Why'd the little shiny man pop? It why'n't he back his way out of there double quick first time he ever seen me? I will tell you why. It's part of their game, that's why. The heart of the wood and the little shiny man, the atom. They can't live without you. Get the knowing of them. No, you can't get the knowing of them till you kill the one and open up the other. Then it's on you, isn't it? Heavy on your back forever. That's my last word this night. Hump my load down the road. It's Yusa roading out." That were my first Yusa show being Connection Man. Showed by Abel Goodparley and Ernie Orphan. The big two, the Prime Minster and the Westminster on the night I took the scar.